Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into an armored behemoth that absolutely dominated battlefields for over 1,000 years. We're talking about the ancient world's answer to the main battle tank.
So think about it like this. In modern warfare, when you need to punch through an enemy line with just overwhelming, terrifying force, what do you send in? You send in the tanks, right? So what was the equivalent 2,000 years ago? You used this, the Cataphract. It was an absolutely unstoppable force of armored man and beast, and it was engineered for one single purpose: to shatter enemy formations with one thunderous, terrifying charge.
So what exactly is a Cataphract? Well, the name itself comes from a Greek word that means fully armored, or closed from all sides, and that's exactly what it was. This was an elite shock assault unit where both the rider and, crucially, the horse were completely encased in a shell of armor. We're talking small, overlapping metal scales, plates laced together called lamellar, or even interlocking rings of chainmail, the whole package.
But you know, a weapon system this complex doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, its story actually begins centuries earlier on the vast open grasslands of Central Asia.
Yeah, the journey to the Cataphract was a long one. It really started with the very domestication of the horse, way back around 2000 BC. Then, over the next 1,000 years or so, Iranian tribes brought their expert horse breeding skills to the Iranian plateau. But the real game changer? That came in the 7th century BC with the Median Empire. They cultivated the famous Nicean horse, a breed that was big enough and strong enough to carry a fully armored rider into battle. That was the key.
You see, it really took a perfect storm of conditions to make this happen. You needed the right horse, you needed advanced metalworking, and a military culture that put cavalry first. But here's the real insight. Fielding Cataphracts wasn't just a tactical choice. It was a huge statement of imperial power. Only a rich, organized state could handle the logistics, the breeding programs, the blacksmiths, the massive pastures you'd need to support these units. This was a revolutionary leap in military organization.
And it was the great Persian empires, first the Parthians and later the Sasanians, that really perfected this recipe, turning the Cataphract into one of history's most feared weapons.
Just listen to this. This quote from the Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus just perfectly captures the absolute terror of facing these guys. He described them as these living statues of iron and said arrows could only find a home in the tiny little slits they had for their eyes and nose. Can you just imagine seeing a silent, glittering wall of metal charging right at you?
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, the horse's armor alone, not even counting the rider's gear, could weigh around 40 kilograms. That's about 88 pounds. That is a massive investment in protection.
And this is brilliant. It shows you exactly how it was done. So on the left, you can see how individual metal scales were sewn onto a leather or cloth backing. And on the right, that's not a drawing. That's a real 2,000-year-old armored neck guard for a horse that archaeologists actually found. This stuff wasn't theoretical. It was a deadly reality.
But this tank wasn't just about defense. Oh no, its main weapon was a truly brutal piece of equipment called the kontos. We're talking about a massive, two-handed lance, roughly 4 meters long.
This amazing relief from Iran shows Sasanian cataphracts right in the middle of combat, and that kontos was so powerful that Roman writers claimed it could skewer 2 men at once. It was basically the ancient world's anti-personnel cannon, focusing the entire momentum of that charging horse and rider into a single, devastating point.
So, of course, this incredible military technology inevitably brought the Persian empires into conflict with the other great superpower of the day, Rome. And let's just say, the Romans were in for a really nasty surprise. You see, this chart really highlights two completely different philosophies of how to use cavalry. Roman cavalry was light, it was fast. You'd use it for skirmishing, for chasing down fleeing enemies. But the Parthian cataphract, that was a slow, heavy battering ram designed for one thing: to obliterate the enemy's main battle line. And this clash of doctrines came to a head in 53 BC at the infamous Battle of Carrhae. Here you have a massive Roman army of 35,000 legionaries under Marcus Crassus facing a much smaller Parthian force. The result would become one of Rome's most humiliating and crushing defeats.
The Parthians used this devastatingly simple tactic. First, their super-mobile horse archers just swarmed the Roman legions, peppering them with endless volleys of arrows. Now, to survive this, the Romans did what they did best. They locked their shields together in the famous testudo, or tortoise formation. But here's the trap. This made them a static, immobile target. And that's exactly when the Cataphracts charged, smashing into the pinned legionaries with those huge kontos lances, completely shattering the Roman lines and their morale.
So, after centuries of being on the receiving end of these terrifying charges, the Romans finally came to a very, very pragmatic conclusion. If you can't beat them, copy them.
I mean, they were faced with constant threats from cataphract-fielding enemies on their eastern frontier and from similar lancers in the north. The Roman army really had no choice. The cataphract went from being this terrifying enemy to an absolute military necessity.
The whole integration was pretty gradual. The first regular units appeared under Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century, but by the 4th century, the Roman Empire deployed its own cataphracts all across its territory. And get this, from Asia Minor all the way to Britain, where a unit of 5,500 Sarmatian cataphracts was stationed. That's right, Britain.
Now, the Western Roman Empire eventually fell, of course, but the story of the cataphract, it doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. Its influence would echo for another 1,000 years.
You see, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire continued and even refined the cataphract tradition. And it was through contact with the Byzantines that this whole concept, a fully armored, lance-wielding shock cavalryman, spread into Western Europe. It directly influenced the development of the iconic medieval knight. The DNA of the cataphract is right there in the jousting fields and battlefields of the Middle Ages. Which brings us to a final thought. The technology changes, sure, from horse and steel to turbine engines and composite armor. But has the fundamental idea of using a heavily protected, mobile weapon system to smash through an enemy line really changed at all? It seems the ghost of the cataphract still rides across our modern battlefields.